After Keisha kicked me out, I landed a job as a cook at a small diner downtown. Every day after my shift, I'd see the same old man begging on the corner. He was older than me, his face weathered by the sun, his hands trembling. Something in his eyes reminded me of my own father. I started stopping in front of him. I'd drop a few coins in his rusted can, sometimes giving him a leftover roll from the kitchen. We never talked much, just exchanged a nod, a tired smile, and then I'd keep going toward the rooming house, where I was now living alone. Welcome to Otis's Journal. I share new life stories here every day, so please hit that like and subscribe button. Now, let's get back to it. I promise this story is worth sticking around for. I was 69 years old when my daughter told me there was no longer a place for me in her house. She didn't raise her voice. There was no scene. She just looked at me from across the table and said it was time for me to find my own space. She said she had her life, her plans, and that I needed to understand. Understand what? I wouldn't know until much later. I remember packing my things into an old duffel bag. Clothes, a few documents, a picture of Keisha when she was small. Nothing else. I didn't have much. I'd spent my entire life taking care of that house, that daughter, that family that was now shutting the door on me with a cold formality that cut deeper than any insult. I didn't cry in front of her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I walked out with my head high, even though inside I felt something shatter. It was like walking barefoot on glass, but refusing to let anyone see the pain. The rooming house, where I found a room, was small and dim. The walls had damp stains, and the mattress creaked every time I moved, but it was what I could afford with the little retirement money I had left. Keisha hadn't given me a dime. She didn't even offer to help with the first month's rent. I spent the first few nights awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone wrong. I'd been a good father. I'd given her everything. I'd worked until my body couldn't take any more. I'd given up my dreams, my desires, so she could have what I never did. And now I was here alone, old, invisible. But I couldn't just sit still. I couldn't afford the luxury of sinking into sadness. I needed money. I needed to eat. So I went out looking for work. I knocked on many doors. Some wouldn't even let me finish talking. "We don't hire people your age anymore," they'd say with an awkward, dismissive smile. At others, they'd look me up and down and shake their heads before I even gave my name until I got to Mrs. Higgins's place. It was a modest local diner with wooden tables and checkered tablecloths. It smelled of fried onions and fresh coffee. Mrs. Higgins was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and big, calloused hands. She looked at me in silence when I told her I was looking for a job. "Can you cook?" she asked. "I've cooked all my life," I replied. She nodded. "Start tomorrow, 6. 0 inches the morning. Don't be late." There was no contract, no paperwork, just a handshake, and the promise of a weekly paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay for the room and buy some food. That night, I slept a little better. I had a purpose. I had something to do. The work at the diner was hard. I spent hours standing, peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, stirring huge pots. My hands filled with small burns. My feet swelled at the end of the day, but I didn't complain. I couldn't afford to. The other employees were young. They looked at me with curiosity at first, then with indifference. I didn't talk much. I just did my job and left. I wasn't looking for friends. I wasn't looking for pity. It was one of those afternoons leaving the diner that I first saw him. He was sitting on the corner near the bus stop. His white hair was messy and unkempt, his clothes dirty and torn. In front of him was a rusted can with a few coins. I passed him by the first time, not because I didn't want to help, but because I barely had anything myself. But something made me turn back. Maybe it was his gaze. Maybe it was the memory of my own father, who had also aged in silence, always waiting for someone to see him. The next day, I stopped in front of him. I took a few coins out of my pocket and dropped them into the can. He looked up and met my tired eyes. He didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod. That became my routine. Every day after work, I'd stop in front of him. Sometimes I gave him money, other times a piece of bread I'd saved from the diner. We never spoke, just that silent exchange of humanity. Weeks passed, then months. My life was reduced to work, walk, sleep. I hadn't heard from Keisha. I wasn't looking for her. I didn't want to know about her. But something was bothering me. Lately, when I walked past the rooming house, I felt like someone was watching me. Once I saw a shadow move behind a window. Another time, climbing the stairs, I heard quick footsteps retreating. I dismissed it. I thought it was my imagination, that the loneliness was playing tricks on me, until one afternoon, as I bent down to hand the man on the corner some change, he grabbed my hand, firmly. His fingers were cold and bony, but his grip was strong. He looked me straight in the eyes and said in a rasping voice, "You've been good to me all these months. Let me return the favor. Don't go back to your rooming house today. Find a cheap motel. Stay there tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll tell you something that will change your life." I froze. His look was serious, urgent. There was no madness in his eyes, just certainty. "Why?" I managed to ask. He shook his head. "Trust me, please." I slowly let go of his hand and walked away, confused. What did he mean? Why shouldn't I go back to my rooming house? What did he know that I didn't? I walked aimlessly for a while, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to ignore his words. I thought maybe he was senile, that he'd confuse things. But another part of me, the part that had felt those strange stares, those footsteps in the dark, told me to listen. I decided to take his advice. I found a cheap motel near downtown. I paid with the little I had saved and went up to a tiny room with a hard bed and a window that faced an alley. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were wrinkled, my dark skin showing the age, and tired. My whole life I'd worked with these hands. I'd cooked, cleaned, cared for others, and now I was here in a strange motel, following the advice of a man who lived on the street. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning to find out what that man had to tell me. The dawn came slowly, filtering through the dirty motel window. I hadn't slept. Every noise in the hallway startled me. Every passing car made me think of the absurdity of my situation. I was in a cheap motel following a stranger's advice, while my room at the rooming house remained empty. I got up with an aching body, washed my face with cold water, and left without eating breakfast. I wasn't hungry. I only had questions. The man, Rufus, was still on his corner as always, as if he hadn't moved all night. But when he saw me arrive, his eyes lit up with something like relief. "You did well not to go back," he said before I could speak. I knelt in front of him, not caring that people were walking past us, looking on curiously. "What's going on? What do you know?" He looked around, making sure no one was listening. Then he leaned toward me and spoke in a low voice. "I saw a woman prowling around your rooming house 2 days ago. Then yesterday afternoon, she was staring up at your window, waiting for something." My heart skipped a beat. "What woman?" "Tall, dark hair, dressed nice, not like the folks around here. She had a black bag in her hand." He paused. "She looked like you around the eyes, the shape of the mouth." I gasped for breath. "Keisha, are you sure?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. He nodded. "I live here on this corner. Nobody sees me, but I see everything. That woman wasn't coming to visit you. She was coming to do something, and it wasn't good." My hands were shaking. I wanted to say he was wrong, that Keisha would never do such a thing, but the words wouldn't come out because deep down a part of me already knew. I had felt her coldness. I had seen her indifference. And now this. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Thank you for warning me." He touched my arm gently. "You fed me when no one else would. It was the least I could do." I walked away from him, stunned. My legs barely held me up. I walked aimlessly for a while, trying to process what I had just heard. Keisha had been at the rooming house looking for me, waiting for me. Why? I walked past the diner, but I didn't go in. I couldn't work in this state. Mrs. Higgins would see my face and know something was wrong. I needed to think. I needed to understand. I went to a nearby city park and sat on a bench. Pigeons pecked at the ground and children played in the distance. Everything seemed so normal, so detached from what I was feeling. I thought about Keisha, about the child she had been. I remembered when she was 5 years old and got a high fever. I spent 3 nights awake taking care of her, putting cold rags on her forehead, praying for her recovery. I remembered her first recital, her graduation, The day she told me she was getting married. When had that child turned into this? I took my old phone out of my pocket. I had a few unread messages. One was from the rooming house landlady. I opened it with trembling hands. "Otis, I need to talk to you urgently. Call me." I dialed her number, my heart racing. She answered on the second ring. "Otis, thank God. Where are you?" Her voice sounded frantic. "In a park. What's wrong?" There was a silence, then a sigh. "There was a problem at the rooming house last night. In your room." My blood ran cold. "What kind of problem?" "There was a gas leak in your room. Specifically, if you had been there." She didn't finish the sentence. The world stopped. A gas leak in my room the very night Rufus had told me not to go back. "How did it happen?" I asked in a voice I barely recognized as my own. "I don't know. The technician came this morning. He said the water heater valve was opened." "But I don't understand. You were always so careful with those things." "I didn't open that valve," I said. "I haven't used the heater in weeks." Another silence. Then someone else did. I hung up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Someone had entered my room, opened the gas valve, tried to kill me, and that someone was Keisha. I went back to the corner where Rufus was. He looked at me sadly, as if he already knew what I had just discovered. "I'm sorry," he said. I simply sat on the ground next to him, not caring about the dirt. My daughter tried to kill me. The words sounded unreal even as I said them, but they were true. As true as the sun beating down on our skin at that moment. "I've seen them before," he said softly. "Children who get tired of waiting, who want what their parents have. It's more common than you think." "But I don't have anything," I said bitterly. "Just a small property my late wife left me. A plot of land that's only worth a few thousand." "For that? For so little?" He looked at me with wise eyes. "For some, any amount is enough. Especially if they have debts, if they have vices, if they have needs they can't control." I remembered the calls then, the ones Keisha received that made her nervous, the quiet conversations, the times I asked to borrow something and she refused, saying she was tight on money. I always thought it was normal, that everyone goes through bad patches, but now everything made sense. Keisha needed money, and I was the only thing standing between her and that plot of land my wife had left me. "What do I do now, brother?" I asked, not to him specifically, but to the air, to the sky, to anyone who wanted to answer. "You go to the police," he said firmly, "and you tell them everything, because if you don't, she'll try again. And next time, you might not have a crazy old man to warn you." He was right. I knew it. But going to the police meant admitting my daughter wanted me dead. It meant putting into words what I could barely accept in my mind. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city. I didn't go to work. I didn't call Mrs. Higgins to explain. I just walked, trying to find the courage to do what I had to do. As evening fell, I went back to the cheap motel. I paid for another night with the little I had left. I locked myself in the room and finally cried. I cried for the daughter I had lost, for the life I had built that was now crumbling, for myself, and for the naivety of believing that a father's love was enough to protect me from everything. When the tears ran out, I washed my face and looked in the mirror. My eyes were swollen. My darkened skin looked older than it was, but there was something new in me, something hard, something that wasn't there before. Determination. I wasn't going to let Keisha win. I wasn't going to die in silence so she could cash in on a piece of land she didn't even need. If she wanted to kill me, she'd have to face me first. The next morning, I found the nearest police precinct. It was an old building with peeling paint. I walked in with a firm step, though I was trembling inside. A young officer greeted me at the counter. "How can I help you, sir?" I took a deep breath. "I'm here to report attempted murder." He looked up, surprised. "Can you give me more details? My daughter tried to kill me," I said. And for the first time since I'd known it, my voice didn't shake when I said it. They sat me in a small room. A female officer with an immaculate uniform and a serious gaze came in. She introduced herself as Sergeant Miller. "Tell me everything from the beginning," she said, opening a notebook. And I told her. I told her about being kicked out of my house, about the job at the diner, about the man on the corner and his warning. about the gas leak, about Keisha prowling the rooming house. The sergeant took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Do you have proof of any of this?" she asked. "The landlady. Can she confirm the gas incident? And the man who warned you? Does he have a name, an address?" I realized I didn't even know his name. "He lives on the street on the corner of Central Avenue." The sergeant closed her notebook. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to be honest with you. Without concrete proof, this is difficult to investigate. A gas leak could be an accident, and the testimony of someone with no fixed address doesn't carry much legal weight." I felt myself sinking. "So, you're not going to do anything?" "I didn't say that. I'm going to open an investigation. I'm going to talk to the landlady. I'm going to check if there are cameras in the area. But I need you to be prepared for this to take time." I nodded, even though inside I felt like I was drowning. Time was exactly what I didn't have because Keisha was still out there, and now she'd know I was onto her. I left the precinct, my legs heavy. The sun beat down on the pavement and people rushed past me, each one wrapped up in their own concerns. No one looked at me. No one knew I had just reported my own daughter for attempted murder. I couldn't go back to the rooming house. That was clear. But I couldn't keep paying for a motel either. The money I had saved was running out fast. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I walked to the diner. Mrs. Higgins was in the kitchen as always, apron stained, brow furrowed while checking a pot. When she saw me come in, her expression softened just a little. "Otis, you didn't come in yesterday or the day before?" "I'm sorry," I said. I didn't know what else to say. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked me up and down. "Are you okay?" The simple question almost broke me. No one had asked me that in so long that I had forgotten what it felt like for someone to care. I nodded, though we both knew it was a lie. "I need to work," I said. "Please, I need the money." Mrs. Higgins sighed. "All right, but if something happens, if you need help, you tell me." "Got it." I nodded again and put on my apron. The work helped me not to think. I peeled potatoes until my hands hurt. I chopped onions until the tears that fell could be confused with those caused by the sting. I washed dishes until the hot water reddened my skin. At the end of the day, Mrs. Higgins paid me for the whole week, even though I had missed 2 days. I didn't say anything. I just took the money and carefully put it in my pocket. When I left, I looked for Rufus on his corner. I needed to talk to someone. I needed someone to understand what I was going through. But he wasn't there that day. His spot was empty. Only the overturned rusted can remained on the ground. A sudden fear washed over me. What if something had happened to him? What if Keisha had found out he had warned me? I walked through the nearby streets looking for him, asking other homeless people if they had seen him. No one knew anything. No one remembered seeing him. I went back to the motel with a tight chest. I went up to my room and sat on the bed, staring at the phone. I had 3 missed calls. All 3 from a number I knew very well. Keisha hadn't left voice messages, just the insistent calls, as if she knew I was avoiding her. I lay down without dinner. The hunger was a dull ache in my stomach, but I didn't have the strength to go out for food. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but every noise startled me. Every step in the hallway made me hold my breath. Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, I finally fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of Keisha as a child. She had a fever and was calling me from her bed. I ran toward her, but the room grew longer and longer. I could never reach her, and her voice became more and more desperate until it turned into a scream. I woke up sweating. The clock read 5 inches the morning. It was still dark outside. I got up and washed my face. There was no point in trying to sleep anymore. I went down to the reception. The night clerk was dozing behind the counter. He didn't see me leave. The streets were empty. Only a few early workers walked toward their jobs. I arrived at the corner where Rufus always was, expecting to find him there, but it was still empty. I sat on the ground in the very spot where he used to be, and waited. I didn't know what else to do. The sky began to lighten slowly, painting itself in shades of gray and orange. The city was waking up around me. That's when I saw him. He was walking slowly down the street, dragging his feet with a plastic bag in his hand. When he saw me sitting in his spot, he stopped, surprised. "What are you doing here so early?" he asked. I got up quickly. I thought something had happened to you. You weren't here yesterday. He smiled tiredly. There's a shelter that opens on Thursdays. They serve hot food. I went there. He held up the bag. They gave me clean clothes. I felt an immense relief. I went to the police. I told them everything. His expression turned serious. And what did they say? That they're going to investigate, but that they need proof. That without proof they can't do much. The rich just need words. We fell silent. I didn't know if Keisha was rich, but she definitely had more than me. She had connections. She had a house. She had a life I had helped build, and from which I was now completely excluded. What are you going to do? He asked me. I don't know, I admitted. I can't go back to the rooming house. I can't keep paying for a motel, and I don't have anywhere to go. He looked at me with those eyes that had seen too much. There's a men's shelter on 7th Street. It's not pretty, but it's safe. You can stay there while you figure things out. The idea of going to a shelter churned my stomach. I had worked my whole life. I had a house, a family, a normal life. And now I was considering going to a shelter as if I were just another homeless person. But that was exactly what I was now. A man without a home. A man whose own daughter wanted him dead. Thank you, I said. I'll think about it. I went straight to the diner from there. Mrs. Higgins was already prepping the day's ingredients. She saw me come in and didn't say anything, just pointed toward the aprons. I worked all morning in silence, grateful for the distraction. During my midday break, I went out for air. I sat in the alley behind the diner where empty vegetable crates were stacked. I took out my phone and stared at Keisha's missed calls. Part of me wanted to answer, wanted to confront her. Ask her why. Ask her how she had gotten to this point. But another part of me knew that would only put her on alert. If she suspected I knew something, she might act faster. She might be more careful. The phone rang in my hand. It was her again. This time, before I could think too much, I answered. Dad, her voice sounded relieved. You finally answered. I've been worried. The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Worried? Yes, I've been calling you. Where are you? Why aren't you at the rooming house? So, she already knew. She had probably gone looking for me. And the landlady had told her I hadn't slept there. I'm staying with a friend, I lied. I needed a change of scenery. There was a pause. What friend? I thought you didn't know anyone around here. I met people at work, I said, keeping my voice steady. Why all the interest, Keisha? I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. That's not true, Dad. I just wanted you to have your space. But you're still my father. I worry about you. The words were right, but the tone was empty. It was like listening to an actor reading a badly written script. I have to hang up, I said. I'm working. Wait, I need to talk to you about something. About Mom's land deed papers. There are some documents I need you to sign. It's to renew the property taxes. Can you come home this weekend? There it was. The real reason for her call. The papers, the land, the inheritance that was worth more than my life. I can't this weekend, I said. I'm busy. It's important, Dad. If we don't renew the taxes, we could lose the property. Then lose it, I said before hanging up. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I had been more direct than I intended. Now she would know something was wrong. I went back inside. Mrs. Higgins looked at me concerned, but didn't ask anything. I finished my shift on autopilot, my mind elsewhere. When I left, I looked up the address Rufus had given me. The shelter was in a gray two-story building. There was a line of men waiting outside, some young, others old like me. I stood at the end of the line. A social worker with a clipboard was taking names. When my turn came, he looked at me with professional weariness. Name and age. Otis Washington, 69. He wrote without looking up. Situation. Domestic violence. I hesitated. Did this count as domestic violence? My daughter kicked me out of the house. He looked up for the first time. Something in my face must have told him there was more to the story. You can come in. There's a bed available tonight. They gave me a clean sheet and showed me a large room with bunk beds. There were other men there, some coughing, others praying, all with the same lost look, all trying to understand how they had ended up there. I put my few belongings under the bed assigned to me and sat on the thin mattress. This was my life now. A shelter, a borrowed bed, no place to call home. But at least I was alive. And as long as I was alive, I could fight. I spent 5 nights at the shelter. 5 nights, listening to men snore, cry out in their sleep, to the whispered conversations of men who couldn't sleep, to the creaking of the bunks every time someone moved. The place smelled of cheap detergent and accumulated desperation. During the day, I worked at the diner. Mrs. Higgins had noticed my tiredness, but she didn't ask. I was grateful for her silence. I didn't have the strength to explain how a 9-year-old man had ended up sleeping in a homeless shelter. On the 6th day, when I arrived at work, Mrs. Higgins was waiting for me at the back door. She had a frown, and her arms were crossed. "I need to talk to you," she said. My heart jumped. She was going to fire me. I couldn't lose this job. It was the only stable thing I had. "Come with me," she said, and led me to her small office at the back of the diner. It was a narrow room with an old desk and walls covered in tacked-up receipts. She sat down and gestured to the other chair. "Sit down." I obeyed, my hands clasped in my lap. "A man came in yesterday asking for you," she said. "Young, well-dressed. Said he was your son-in-law." My blood froze. "Derek. What did he want?" "He asked where you lived. Said your daughter was worried because you weren't answering the phone. That they wanted to make sure you were okay." "What did you tell him?" "That I didn't know. That you just come to work and leave." She looked me straight in the eyes. "Otis, are you in trouble?" The words caught in my throat. I wanted to say no, that everything was fine, but my face betrayed me. Mrs. Higgins sighed. "I don't know what's going on, and I'm not going to force you to tell me." But that man didn't look worried. He looked like he was hunting. She was right. Keisha was looking for me, and now she was using her husband to track me down. "Thank you for not telling him anything," I managed to say. "Be careful," Mrs. Higgins said, "and if you need anything, even if it's just someone to know where you are in case something happens, you tell me." I nodded and left the office, my legs trembling. I worked the rest of the day constantly watching the door, expecting to see Derek appear at any moment. That afternoon, when I left the diner, I went straight to the corner where Rufus always was. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to vent before I exploded. He was there, sitting in his usual spot with the can in front of him. When he saw me arrive, my face distraught, he made space for me beside him. "Tell me," he said simply. I told him about Keisha's call, about Derek's visit to the diner, about how trapped I felt, not knowing what to do. He listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he was thoughtful. "You know what surprises me the most about all this?" he finally said. "That she thinks you're stupid. She thinks you won't notice, that you can be easily manipulated." He was right. Keisha had always treated me that way, as if I were naive, as if I didn't understand how the world worked. "Use that to your advantage," he continued. "Let her think she's in control. In the meantime, you prepare your defense." "What defense? I have nothing, not even proof of what she did." He looked at me with that wisdom that only comes from living on the street. "The proof is out there. You just have to know where to look. Your landlady can testify about the gas. The technician who checked the installation has a report. And I saw your daughter that night. The officer said your testimony doesn't count for much because you don't have a fixed address," I said bitterly. "Then we have to give me one," he said with a sad smile. "Or get something else that makes me credible." I didn't understand what he meant until 2 days later. It was Friday morning. I arrived at the diner early as always, but when I walked in the back door, I found Mrs. Higgins talking to a woman in a uniform. It wasn't a regular police officer. It was Sergeant Miller. My first instinct was to run, but Mrs. Higgins saw me and motioned for me to approach. "Mr. Washington," the sergeant said, "I need to talk to you." Panic tightened my chest. Did something happen? Yes and no. "Can we speak privately?" Mrs. Higgins lent us her office. The sergeant closed the door and pulled out a manila folder. "I've been investigating your case," she said, "and I found some interesting things." She opened the folder and showed me some papers. They were bank statements. It took me a moment to realize they were Keisha's. "How did you get these?" I asked. "I have my methods," she said vaguely. Look here. Your daughter has considerable debts. Unpaid loans, credit cards maxed out. And 3 months ago, she took out a loan using the land your wife left you as collateral. I couldn't breathe. She can do that? The land is in my name. Not if she forged your signature. And that's exactly what I believe happened. She showed me another paper. This is the deed she presented to the bank. This is her signature. I looked at the document. The signature resembled mine. But it wasn't exact. The strokes were different. Firmer, more confident. No, I said. That is not my signature. The sergeant nodded, satisfied. That's what I thought. This changes everything. We're no longer talking about just attempted murder. We're talking about fraud, document forgery, and possibly more. What does that mean? It means we have a solid reason to arrest her. Attempted murder is hard to prove without credible witnesses, but bank fraud is clearer. Banks don't take these things lightly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. They're going to arrest her. I need you to come to the precinct and make a formal statement about the forgery. I also need you to bring any documents you have about the land, original deeds, papers, anything that proves you are the sole owner. They're at the rooming house. I said, in a box under my bed. Can I go get them? The idea of going back to the rooming house terrified me, but I needed those papers. They were the only proof that the land was mine. I'll go with you, the sergeant said, as if reading my mind. You won't be alone. We went that same afternoon. The sergeant drove an unmarked patrol car. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, my hands clasped in my lap. When we arrived at the rooming house, the landlady was at the front desk. She was surprised to see me with a police officer. Otis, what's going on? I need to pick up some things from my room, I said. She gave me the key without asking questions. We went up to the second floor. My room was at the end of the hall. The door was still locked, just as I had left it. I opened it with trembling hands. The room was exactly as I remembered it. The bed unmade, the curtains drawn, the smell of stale air. I knelt by the bed and pulled out the shoebox I kept underneath. Inside were all my important documents: my birth certificate, marriage certificate, my wife's death certificate, and the land deed. I carefully pulled out the deed and handed it to the sergeant. She quickly examined it. Perfect, she said. This is enough. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the hall. Voices. One of them I recognized immediately. Keisha. The sergeant heard it too. She put a hand on my shoulder. Stay here, she whispered. She stepped out into the hall. I stood paralyzed next to the bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought whoever was outside could hear it. I heard the sergeant's voice. Can I help you? Who are you? Keisha replied. What are you doing in my father's room? I'm Sergeant Miller. And you are? Keisha Davis. This is my father's room. Where is he? I'm right here, I said, stepping into the hallway. I don't know where I found the courage, but suddenly I felt tired of hiding. Keisha looked at me surprised. Then her expression changed to one that pretended to be relief. Dad! Thank God! I've been looking for you everywhere. Have you really? I said. My voice sounded firmer than I felt. Or were you just looking for this? I held up the land deed. Her face turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice barely trembled. We're talking about the forged signature you used to put my land up as collateral for your debts, the sergeant said. We're talking about fraud, and we're also talking about the gas incident at this rooming house. Keisha looked at me with a mixture of rage and fear. Dad, what have you been telling this woman? What lies have you invented? They're not lies, I said, and you know it. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny everything, that she would keep acting like the worried daughter. But something in her face broke. I saw the truth, the silent admission. I had debts, she finally said in a low voice. I needed the money, and you weren't using that land for anything. Then, you asked me to sell it to you. You didn't try to kill me for it. I didn't try to kill you, she said, but without conviction. The gas, Keisha. Someone opened the heater valve the night I didn't sleep here. Who was it? She didn't answer. She just looked at me with eyes I no longer recognized. This wasn't my daughter. Or perhaps she had always been this way, and I had been too blind to see it. Keisha Davis, the sergeant said. You are under arrest for bank fraud and document forgery. You have the right to remain silent. As the sergeant read her rights and put on the handcuffs, Keisha didn't stop looking at me. And in that look, I saw everything we had lost, everything we could never get back. I watched them take Keisha away in the patrol car, her hands cuffed behind her back, her head down, shame or anger painted on her face. I couldn't distinguish which of the two. The landlady watched me from the doorway, wide-eyed, not knowing what to say. Sergeant Miller stayed with me a few more minutes. I need you to come to the precinct tomorrow to make a full statement. Bring all the documents you have. We're going to need every detail. I nodded, unable to speak. I was still processing what had just happened. My daughter had been arrested because of me, or because of herself? I didn't even know how to think about it anymore. That night, I didn't go back to the shelter. I couldn't face all those men with their own tragedies. I stayed in my rooming house room, sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. I didn't eat. I didn't cry. I just stayed there feeling an enormous emptiness in my chest. When dawn broke, I got up like an automaton. I bathed, got dressed, and went straight to look for Rufus on his corner. I needed to tell him what had happened. I needed someone to tell me I had done the right thing. But when I got to his spot, I found something unexpected. He was there, but he wasn't alone. There was a young woman with him, sitting at his side, talking to him softly. She had a backpack and a camera hanging around her neck. I approached slowly. Rufus saw me and smiled tiredly. "Otis," he said, "come here. I want you to meet someone." The young woman stood up and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you. My name is Jasmine. I'm a journalist." I shook her hand with suspicion. "A journalist?" "I'm doing a report on the homeless in the city," Jasmine explained. "He's been telling me his story and yours, too." I looked at Rufus. "You told her about me." He nodded. "I told her everything about your daughter, about the gas, about how you helped me every day without knowing me." "I don't understand," I said. "Why?" Jasmine took out a notebook. "Because stories like yours need to be told. People think that people on the street are invisible, that they don't see anything, that they don't matter. But Rufus saw what was happening, and his testimony can be crucial to your case." "The officer said his testimony didn't carry weight because he doesn't have a fixed address," I said bitterly. "That's why I'm here," Jasmine said. "If I can document his story, if I can show that Rufus is a real person with a clear mind who witnessed a crime, his testimony gains value. Plus, media exposure might pressure the authorities to take the case more seriously." I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to keep all this private, away from the public eye. But another part of me knew Jasmine was right. Keisha had resources, contacts. I only had the truth. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Your story in your own words, and your permission to publish it." We spent the next hour sitting on a nearby park bench. I told her everything from the beginning. How Keisha had kicked me out of the house, how I had gotten the job, how I had met Rufus, the warning, the gas, the arrest. Jasmine took notes quickly, stopping occasionally to ask specific questions. Rufus sat beside me, nodding when I mentioned moments when he had been present. "And the proof of the fraud?" Jasmine asked. "Did you present it?" "I'm going to the precinct today. The sergeant has the documents." "I can go with you." "I'd like to document that process." I hesitated, but finally nodded. If this was going to go public anyway, it might as well be with the whole truth. The three of us went to the precinct together. Sergeant Miller was surprised to see the journalist, but she didn't kick her out. Instead, she took me to an interrogation room and asked me to tell everything again, this time recording it officially. I spoke for almost 2 hours. The sergeant interrupted me occasionally to clarify details, to ask me to be more specific about some things. When I finished, I felt exhausted. "We're going to process all this," the sergeant said. "Your daughter is being processed for bank fraud. That's solid. The attempted murder is more complicated to prove, but with Rufus's testimony and the gas evidence, we have a foundation." "How long will she be detained?" I asked. "It depends on whether she posts bail. For bank fraud, bail could be around $30,000. If she can't pay it, she stays until trial. $30,000. Keisha didn't have that kind of money. That's why she had tried to steal the land in the first place. We left the precinct and Jasmine walked me back to the diner. It was time for my shift and I couldn't miss work again. "I'm going to write the article this week," she told me before leaving. "I'll send you a copy before publishing it so you can approve everything. Sound good?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." Mrs. Higgins was waiting for me in the kitchen with a concerned expression. There were more customers than usual and she needed urgent help. I put on my apron and submerged myself in the work, grateful for the distraction. But mid-afternoon, everything changed. A man came in whom I recognized immediately. It was Derek, Keisha's husband. He looked distraught, his eyes red. He saw me behind the counter and came straight toward me. "You," he said in a trembling voice. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" Everyone in the diner fell silent. Mrs. Higgins came out of the kitchen when she heard the commotion. "I didn't do anything to her," I said calmly. Although I was shaking inside, she did it to herself. "You put her in jail for a stupid piece of property that wasn't even worth anything. She forged my signature," I said. "She tried to steal the only thing I had left from my wife. And when that didn't work, she tried to kill me." He shook his head violently. "That's a lie. Keisha would never do anything like that. You're inventing everything because you're resentful that she asked you to leave our house." "Her house," I repeated. "That house I helped pay for? That house where I raised the daughter who now wants me dead?" "Sir, Mrs. Higgins intervened firmly. "I need you to leave. You are harassing my employee." "Employee," he looked at me with contempt. "Look what you've become. A cook in a dive diner, and all because of your pride." "You're right," I said. "If I had let myself be robbed in silence, if I had agreed to die when the gas was opened in my room, none of this would have happened. But I'm alive, and I'm going to fight." He gave me one last look of pure hatred. "This isn't over. Keisha has lawyers. She's getting out, and when she gets out, you're going to regret this." "Is that a threat?" Mrs. Higgins asked, pulling out her phone. "Because I can call the police right now." Derek gave me one last furious look before storming out of the diner. The silence hung heavy in the air. The customers slowly returned to their conversations. I stood behind the counter, my legs barely holding me up. Mrs. Higgins put a hand on my shoulder. "Take the rest of the day off." "No," I said. "I need to work. I need to stay busy." She nodded, understanding, and went back to the kitchen. I kept working, but my hands trembled every time I had to carry a plate. That night, when I returned to the rooming house, I found an envelope slipped under my door. I picked it up, my heart racing. Inside was a handwritten note in crude letters. "Drop the charges or you'll regret it. This is your final warning." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I knew where it came from. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the bed with the light on, staring at the door, expecting someone to try to come in. I had put a chair under the doorknob, but I knew that wouldn't stop anyone if they really wanted in. At dawn, I went straight back to the precinct. I showed the note to Sergeant Miller. She read it, her brow furrowed. "This is witness intimidation. I'm going to add this to the file." "Can't you do something more?" I asked. "Can't you protect me? I can put more frequent patrols near your rooming house, and I recommend you don't go out alone at night. Do you have any safer place to stay?" I thought of the shelter. I thought of asking Mrs. Higgins for help. But finally, I shook my head. I didn't want to keep running. "I'm going to be fine," I lied. But that afternoon, when Rufus saw me arrive at his corner, he immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked. I showed him the note. He read it in silence and then looked at me with determination. "You have to let Jasmine publish the article. Don't wait any longer. The more people know what's happening, the safer you'll be." "You think so? I know how these things work. Criminals act in the shadows, but when the lights are on them, they hide. If your story comes out in the newspaper, if people know who you are and what they're doing to you, they'll think twice before touching you." It made sense. I called Jasmine from Rufus's phone. She answered on the second ring. "Publish the article," I told her without preamble, "as soon as possible." "Are you sure? I haven't even sent you the final version for approval yet." "I'm sure. Just make sure you tell the truth." "I always do," she said. "It will be in the morning edition tomorrow and the digital version tonight." I hung up and handed the phone back to Rufus. He squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," he said. "Now, let the truth do its job." The article was published at 6:00 the morning. Jasmine sent me the link via text message. I read it sitting on the edge of my bed, my hands shaking as I held the phone. The headline read, "Elderly father claims daughter tried to murder him for inheritance. Homeless man saved him." There were photos, one of Rufus on his corner, one of the rooming house where I lived, and one of me taken the day we went to the precinct. I looked older than I remembered, more tired. But there was something in my eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. The article told everything. My expulsion from home, the job at the diner, how I had helped Rufus, the warning that saved my life, the gas, the document forgery, Keisha's arrest. Jasmine had done a good job. She didn't exaggerate anything. She didn't paint me as a martyr or Keisha as a monster. She just told the facts, letting the story speak for itself. At the end of the article was a quote from me that I didn't even remember saying. "I don't want vengeance. I just want justice. And I want other fathers to know they are not alone if their own children betray them." I closed the phone and sat in silence. Now the whole world knew my story. There was no going back. When I arrived at the diner, Mrs. Higgins had already read the article. She looked at me with a mixture of compassion and respect. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know things had gotten so bad." "No one knew," I replied. Not even I wanted to admit it. Throughout the morning, customers at the diner looked at me differently. Some with pity, others with curiosity, a few with admiration. An elderly man approached me at the end of his meal. "I read your story," he said in a low voice. "My son did something similar to me. I never had the courage to report him, but you did. Thank you for that." He left before I could respond, leaving me with a lump in my throat. Mid-afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered with caution. "Mr. Washington, I'm attorney Lisa Green. I'm a lawyer. I read your story in the paper, and I'd like to offer my services pro bono." I was speechless. "Why would you do that?" "Because cases like yours need visibility. Because family abuse of elderly parents is more common than people think, and because no one should have to face this alone." I agreed to meet with her that same afternoon. Her office was in a modest building downtown. She was a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back in a bun and an intelligent gaze. "We'll go over everything from the beginning," she said, opening a new folder. "I need every detail, every document, every piece of evidence you have." We spent 2 hours reviewing my case. She took meticulous notes, stopping occasionally to ask specific questions. "The bank fraud is solid," she finally said. "We have the forged signature. We have your testimony. We have the original documents. That's a sure thing. The attempted murder is more complicated, but not impossible. Rufus's testimony is crucial, and the fact that the gas was opened specifically in your room the night you weren't there is highly suspicious. What happens now? Now, we wait for the legal process. Your daughter has the right to a lawyer and to defend herself. There will be a preliminary hearing in a few days to determine if there is enough evidence to go to trial. I will be there representing you." I left her office feeling a little stronger. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was on my side, that I wasn't completely alone in this. When I passed Rufus's corner, I found him surrounded by people. I approached concerned, but then I saw that it wasn't anything bad. They were people who had read the article and wanted to help him. Someone had brought him food, another a new blanket. A man was offering him a spot in a decent shelter. Rufus saw me and smiled. "Look what your story has done." "Our story," I corrected. That night, as I ate a piece of bread in my room, I received another call. This time it was Sergeant Miller. "Mr. Washington, I need to inform you that your daughter posted bail this morning." My heart skipped a beat. "How? I thought she didn't have any money." "Apparently, her husband borrowed from some relatives. She was released under strict conditions. She can't approach you. She can't leave the city, and she has to check in at the precinct every week. But she's free for now." "Yes, until trial." I hung up, my hands trembling. Keisha was free out there somewhere in the city. And although I had a restraining order, that was just a piece of paper. If she really wanted to hurt me, a piece of paper wouldn't stop her. I couldn't sleep that night. Every noise startled me. Every shadow that passed my window made me hold my breath. I put the chair under the doorknob again and left the light on. At 3:00 the morning, I heard footsteps in the hall. They stopped in front of my door. My heart pounded so loudly I thought whoever was outside could hear it. I waited. The seconds felt like hours. Then I heard the sound of something sliding under the door. I waited several minutes before daring to move. When I finally went to check, I found another envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo. It was of me leaving the diner. Someone had been following me. Someone had been taking my picture. And on the photo, an X was drawn over my face in red marker. There was no message. None was needed. The threat was clear. At dawn, I went back to the precinct. Sergeant Miller saw the photo, and her expression hardened. "This is a violation of the restraining order. I'm going to send an officer to arrest her again." What if it wasn't her? What if it was someone else? Who else would want to threaten you? I thought of Derek, his furious words at the diner, his look of hatred. Her husband came to the diner a few days ago. He threatened me. The sergeant noted that. "We'll investigate both of them. In the meantime, I recommend you find a safer place to stay. Do you have any family? Any friends?" I had no one. Only Rufus, who lived on the street, and Mrs. Higgins, who had already done enough for me. "The shelter, then," I said with resignation. But when I got to the shelter that afternoon, they told me there were no beds available. It was full. I could try again the next day, but they couldn't guarantee anything. I stood in the street with my bag in my hand, not knowing what to do. The sun was beginning to set. It would be night soon, and I had nowhere to sleep. That's when I saw Mrs. Higgins approaching. She had come looking for me. "Rufus called me," she said. "He told me what happened, and I came to offer you something. I have a small room above the diner. I use it for storage, but we can clean it out. It's not much, but it has a bed and a lock on the door. You'd be safer there than in the rooming house." Tears burned my eyes. "I can't accept. You've already done so much for me. I'm not asking for your permission," she said firmly. "I'm telling you the room is available. If you want to use it, use it. If not, it's your decision. But I'm not going to let one of my employees sleep on the street when I have space available." I accepted, not because I wanted to take advantage of her kindness, but because I had no other choice, and because deep down I needed to feel safe, even if it was just for one night. The room above the diner was small, as she had said. It had a twin bed, an old wardrobe, and a window that overlooked an alley. But the door had a strong deadbolt, and the walls were thick. Here, at least, I could hear if anyone tried to enter. Mrs. Higgins helped me carry my few belongings up. "The bathroom is downstairs in the diner. You can use it whenever you want, and there's food in the kitchen. Don't go hungry." "Thank you." That was all I could say. Words weren't enough to express what I felt. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because the bed was comfortable or because the place was pretty, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. The next morning, unexpected news arrived. Sergeant Miller had arrested Derek. They had found him near the rooming house the night before with a camera in his hand. He had been the one following me. He had taken the photo. "He says he just wanted to scare you," the sergeant explained to me over the phone. "That he wasn't going to really hurt you, but that doesn't matter. Witness intimidation is a serious offense. He'll be detained for a few days while we process the charges." I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Derek wasn't a bad person originally. He was just desperate trying to save his wife. But his actions had crossed a line. The preliminary trial was scheduled for the following week. Attorney Green prepared me for days, having me review my testimony again and again, anticipating the questions Keisha's lawyer might ask. "They're going to try to paint you as a resentful father," she warned. "They're going to say you invented everything because you were angry that she asked you to leave her house. You have to stay calm. You have to stick to the facts." I practiced my testimony until the words felt mechanical, but I knew it was necessary. The trial wouldn't be one with emotions. It would be one with evidence. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived like a storm that you see coming, but that still hits you hard. I woke up early before dawn and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the clothes I had prepared the night before. A simple gray suit, worn but clean shoes. It was the best I had. Attorney Green picked me up at the diner at 7 inches the morning. She carried a leather briefcase and a serious expression. "Ready?" she asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The courthouse was an old building with dark hallways and the smell of old paper. There were people waiting on benches outside the rooms, entire families, lawyers in expensive suits, talking in low voices. Everything seemed intimidating and alien. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I had imagined. There were wooden benches, a stand where the judge would sit, and 2 tables facing each other for the lawyers. At one of them, I saw Keisha sitting next to her lawyer. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize. She must have bought it especially for this, or maybe she had kept it stored away all this time. She didn't look at me when I entered. She kept her gaze forward as if I didn't exist. I sat behind Attorney Green's table. Rufus was sitting in the public benches. He greeted me with a discreet gesture. Jasmine, the journalist, was also there with her notebook, and Mrs. Higgins, who had closed the diner for the morning to support me. The judge entered, and we all stood. He was an older man, about 60 years old, with completely white hair and thick glasses. He sat down and began reviewing the documents in front of him. "Very well," he finally said. "We are here for the preliminary hearing in the case of Otis Washington versus Keisha Davis. The charges are bank fraud, document forgery, and attempted murder. Is the prosecution ready to present its arguments?" Attorney Green stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." Over the next hour, she presented all the evidence. The forged signature on the bank documents, Keisha's bank statements showing her debts, the technician's report on the gas leak in my room, the landlady's testimony. Everything was there, organized and clear. Then it was my turn to testify. I went up to the stand, my legs trembling. I swore to tell the truth with my hand on a worn Bible and began to tell my story. I talked about how Keisha had asked me to leave the house, how I had found work at the diner, about my conversations with Rufus, about the night he warned me not to go back to the rooming house, about the gas. Keisha's lawyer interrupted me several times with objections. "That's speculation, Your Honor. The witness is assuming intentions he cannot prove." Attorney Green responded to each objection with professional calmness. When my testimony was finished, it was the turn of Keisha's lawyer to cross-examine me. He was a young man in his 30s with an immaculate suit and a practiced smile. "Mr. Washington," he began in a soft tone, "is it true that you and your daughter had a disagreement about the management of your finances?" "No," I replied. "She never consulted me about my finances. But you were aware that she had financial problems. I found out later when she forged my signature. Is it possible that you misinterpreted the situation? That your daughter needed help, and you, in your vulnerable situation, felt attacked?" "I didn't misinterpret anything," I said firmly. "My daughter forged my signature to use my property as collateral for her debts, and when that wasn't enough, she tried to kill me with a gas leak. That is a very serious accusation. Do you have any direct proof that your daughter opened the gas valve?" Rufus's testimony. He saw her prowling around my rooming house that night. The lawyer smiled. "Ah, yes, Rufus. A man with no fixed address, no verifiable identification, no background we can check. Do you truly expect this court to accept the testimony of someone whose identity we can't even confirm?" "Rufus saved my life," I said, "and his testimony is as valid as anyone else's." "Your Honor," Attorney Green intervened, "a witness's credibility is not determined by their housing situation." The judge nodded. "Proceed, Counselor." The interrogation continued for another half hour. Keisha's lawyer tried to discredit every part of my story. He implied I was inventing things out of spite, that I was confused due to my age, that I had misinterpreted my daughter's intentions. But I stayed calm. I answered every question truthfully. I didn't let myself be intimidated. When my testimony finally ended, I returned to my seat, trembling. Attorney Green squeezed my hand. "You did well," she whispered. Then it was Rufus's turn. He went up to the stand in his donated clothes, clean but worn. He swore to tell the truth and began to testify. He spoke about how he had met me, about the times I gave him food and money, about the night he saw Keisha prowling my rooming house with a bag in her hand. His voice was clear, and his memory was precise. Keisha's lawyer tried to discredit him too. "How can you be sure it was my client? Do you have a photo?" "I don't need a photo," Rufus replied with dignity. "I have eyes, and I saw that woman sitting there lurking where she shouldn't have been." When the testimonies were finished, the judge called a recess. We went out into the hallway to wait. Attorney Green seemed optimistic. "The fraud is solid," she told me. "That's going to trial for sure. The attempted murder is more difficult to prove, but we presented a strong case." Half an hour later, we went back in. The judge had his decision ready. After reviewing the evidence presented, he said, "I find there is probable cause to proceed with the charges of bank fraud and document forgery. Regarding the charge of attempted murder, although the evidence is circumstantial, there are sufficient suspicious elements to warrant a deeper investigation. The case will proceed to a full trial." I felt like I could breathe again. Keisha would still face the charges. Justice would continue its course. The months that followed were the strangest of my life. As we waited for the full trial date, my routine became a bizarre mix of normalcy and constant tension. I worked at the diner during the day. I slept in the room above the kitchen at night, and every week I met with Attorney Green to prepare my final testimony. But something had changed in me. I was no longer just the man who had been kicked out of his house. I was no longer just the victim. I was becoming someone different, someone stronger. Jasmine's article had an impact none of us expected. Other elders began to contact me. Women and men who had gone through similar situations, daughters who had abandoned their mothers, sons who had stolen their pensions, families that had disintegrated due to greed. One afternoon, as I was wiping down the diner tables, an elderly man walked in. He looked about 70 with a cane and hands full of rings. He sat at a corner table and waited for me to approach. "Otis Washington?" he asked when I arrived with the menu. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "I read your story. My name is Brenda Cole. Well, Brenda is my wife. I'm Mr. Cole, and we came to offer you something." He introduced himself as the director of an organization that helps seniors in situations of family abuse. "We want you to give talks," he explained. "Tell your story. Help others recognize the signs of abuse before it's too late." The idea overwhelmed me. I'm not good at public speaking. "You don't need to be good, Mr. Cole said softly. "You just need to be honest. Your story has power. You can save lives." I agreed to think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If my suffering could be used to help others, then it hadn't been in vain. My first talk was at a small community center. There were about 20 people sitting in folding chairs, all over 60, all with stories written on their tired faces. My hands were shaking when I stood in front of them. "My name is Otis Washington," I began, "and my daughter tried to kill me over a piece of land worth $3,000. The silence in the room was absolute, and then I started talking. I told them everything. I didn't omit anything. The pain, the shame, the fear. But I also told them about the hope, about Rufus, about the people who had helped me when I needed it most. When I finished, several people had tears in their eyes. One woman raised her hand. "My son does the same thing," she said in a broken voice. "He constantly asks me for money. He threatens me if I don't give it to him. I thought it was my fault that I had done something wrong." "It's not your fault," I told her. "And you are not alone." After that talk, more came. I spoke in churches, in senior day centers, in support groups. Each time it was easier. Each time I felt like my story was serving a purpose greater than myself. Meanwhile, Rufus was changing too. The exposure from the article had brought him unexpected help. A nonprofit organization had found him a spot in a permanent shelter. He no longer slept on the street. He had a bed, a roof, 3 meals a day. But the most important thing was the bond we had created. We saw each other almost every day. Sometimes he came to the diner and Mrs. Higgins gave him free food. Other times I went to the shelter to visit him. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me stories of his life before he was homeless. I told him my fears about the approaching trial. You know what the strangest thing about all this is? I told him one afternoon while we were having coffee at the shelter. My daughter kicked me out of her life, but I found a new family. Higgins, Attorney Green, even Jasmine. They've all become the family I never thought I'd have. Rufus smiled. Sometimes God closes doors so we can find windows, or in our case, so we can find street corners. We laughed together. It was the first time in months I had truly laughed. The trial was scheduled for early December. 2 weeks before, Attorney Green called me with news. Keisha's lawyer wants to make a deal. She told me he's offering for Keisha to plead guilty to the bank fraud in exchange for you dropping the attempted murder charge. What does that mean? It means she would go to prison for the fraud, likely between 3 and 5 years. But she wouldn't face charges for trying to kill you. It's a shorter sentence. And what do you think? There was a pause. I think the attempted murder charge is difficult to prove. We have strong circumstantial evidence, but we don't have a confession or a direct witness who saw her open the gas valve. A jury could have doubts. Accepting the deal guarantees she goes to prison. Rejecting it is a risk. How much time do I have to decide? Until tomorrow. I spent that night awake. I paced back and forth in my small room thinking about all the options. Part of me wanted to reject the deal. I wanted Keisha to face all the charges. I wanted her to pay for trying to kill me. But another part of me was tired of fighting, tired of reliving the pain over and over. 3 years in prison was enough for her to understand the consequences of her actions. 5 years, even more so. The next morning, I called Attorney Green. I accept the deal, I told her, but with one condition. I want her to renounce all rights to the land, to sign legal documents ceding any future claim on my property, and I want a permanent restraining order. I don't want her to ever come near me again, even when she gets out of prison. I can arrange that, she said. Leave it to me. The deal was finalized 3 days later. Keisha pleaded guilty to bank fraud and document forgery. She signed the papers, renouncing any rights to my property. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison with no possibility of parole until she served at least 2 years. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I didn't want to see her face when she heard the verdict. Attorney Green went on my behalf and called me afterward with the news. It's over, she told me. You can move forward with your life now. But moving forward wasn't as simple as it sounded. The months that followed were about adjustment, healing, learning to live without the constant weight of fear. Mrs. Higgins offered me a permanent job at the diner with a decent salary. You're no longer just temporary help, she said. You're part of this place, and I want you to stay. I accepted with gratitude. The diner had become my refuge, my home. I also began to rebuild my financial life. With Attorney Green's help, I managed to sell the land my wife had left me. It wasn't worth much, as Keisha had said. Only $3,000, but it was enough to start over. I used part of the money to rent a small apartment. Just one room, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. But it was mine. No one could kick me out of there. No one could tell me there was no room for me. With another part of the money, I helped Rufus. I bought him new clothes, shoes, a thick coat for the winter. I paid for the dental treatment he urgently needed. It wasn't charity, it was gratitude. He had saved my life. The least I could do was help him improve his. You didn't have to do this, he said when I handed him the bags of new things. Yes, I did, I replied. You gave me a second chance. Let me return the favor. The talks I gave at community centers began to multiply. Mr. Cole, the organization director, had officially brought me on as a volunteer. Now I traveled around the city giving lectures on family abuse toward seniors. Every time I told my story, I saw faces recognizing themselves in it. People who nodded with tears in their eyes, men who admitted to having gone through similar situations, and always at the end, someone would approach to thank me. Your story gave me the courage to report my son, a woman told me after one talk. Thanks to you, my father finally accepted that what was happening to him wasn't normal, another told me. Each thank you was a reminder that my suffering hadn't been useless, that something good had come out of all that pain. A year after Keisha's arrest, Jasmine published a follow-up article. 1 year later, how Otis Washington rebuilt his life after family betrayal. The article talked about my work at the diner, my talks, my friendship with Rufus, about how I had turned my tragedy into a mission. The response was overwhelming. I received letters from all over the country. Some were from elders thanking me for giving them a voice. Others were from remorseful children who had read my story and realized the harm they were causing their own parents. One letter in particular made me cry. It was from a young man who had been considering kicking his father out of his house due to lack of space. After reading my story, he had decided to look for another solution. "I don't want to be like Otis's daughter," he wrote. "I don't want my father to end up like that. Thank you for opening my eyes." I keep that letter in a drawer alongside others I received during the difficult days. When the memory of the pain is too strong, I pull them out and reread them. They remind me why I decided to go public with my story, why I decided to keep fighting. 2 years have passed since Keisha went to prison. 2 years in which my life has changed in ways I never imagined possible. I wake up every morning in my small apartment, brew coffee in my tiny kitchen, and look out the window at the city that almost destroyed me, but ultimately gave me a second chance. Mrs. Higgins' diner is still my daily refuge. I'm now the head cook. She says my food has a special flavor, that people come specifically for my stews. I don't know if it's true or just her way of making me feel valuable, but I like to believe her. Mrs. Higgins has become more than a boss. She's the sister I never had, the friend who showed up when I needed her most. Sometimes on quiet afternoons, we sit in the kitchen drinking coffee and she tells me stories of her youth. I tell her mine, and we laugh about how life has strange ways of putting the right people in your path just when you're about to give up. Rufus still lives at the shelter, but he no longer spends his days sitting on a corner. He now volunteers at a community kitchen. He helps serve food to other homeless people. He says it's his way of giving back what others gave him when he needed it most. We see each other at least 3 times a week. Sometimes I go to visit him at the shelter. Other times he comes to the diner, and we eat dinner together after I close. We talk about everything. Our past lives, our fears, our dreams for the future. He is the brother I chose, the family I built with my own hands. Did you know that today marks exactly 2 years since I gave you that warning? He told me a few days ago while we shared a plate of chicken and rice in the empty diner. I hadn't known, but thinking about it, I realized how much I had changed since that night. The man who agreed not to return to his rooming house based on a stranger's advice no longer exists. In his place is someone stronger, someone who knows that kindness is not weakness and that asking for help is not a shame. My talks at community centers have expanded. I now travel to other cities. Mr. Cole's organization pays me a small stipend for each conference. It's not much, but added to my salary from the diner, it's enough to live with dignity. Every time I get on a stage and see those tired faces looking at me with hope, I remember why I do this. It's not just for me. It's for all the people who are going through what I went through, for all the parents who feel invisible, disposable, worthless. You are not a burden. I always tell them. You are human beings with dignity, with rights, with stories that deserve to be told. And if someone, even if it's your own family, makes you feel less than that, then that person is wrong, not you. After each talk, lines of people form, wanting to speak to me. Some just want to give me a hug. Others need advice on how to report their abusive family members. Some simply need someone to listen to them. I stay with each one for as long as they need because I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like for no one to listen to you. And if I can give them even 10 minutes of attention, of validation, of company, I do it. I have received 2 letters from Keisha since she's been in prison. The first came a year ago. It was short, cold, full of justifications. "It wasn't my intention to hurt you," it said. "I was just desperate. I hope you can forgive me someday." I didn't reply to it. The second letter arrived 3 months ago. It was different, more honest, more broken. It talked about how she had had time to think in prison, about how she finally understood the magnitude of what she had done, about how she lived with the guilt every day. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she wrote at the end. "I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I truly am." I keep that letter in the same drawer where I keep the others, the ones from the people who thank me for my story, the ones from the remorseful children, altogether reminding me that life is complex, that people can be good and bad at the same time, that forgiveness is not always possible, but understanding is. I don't know if I can ever forgive Keisha. Honestly, I don't know if I want to. What she did almost cost me my life. It cost me my home, my security, my faith in family. Those are wounds that don't heal easily. But I've learned that I don't need to forgive her to move forward, that I can carry the pain and still build a beautiful life, that I can remember what happened without letting it define me. Attorney Green has become a close friend. We have lunch together once a month. She tells me about her other cases. I tell her about my conferences. Sometimes she asks me for advice on how to approach older clients who have gone through situations similar to mine. You have a gift for this, she told me the last time we saw each other, for connecting with people, for making them feel seen. Maybe she's right. Or maybe it's just that I've been in their shoes. I felt what they feel. And that genuine empathy is something that can't be faked. The apartment I rented has become my sanctuary. It's small. Yes, the walls are thin, and sometimes I hear the neighbors arguing, but it is mine. No one can kick me out. No one can tell me there's no room for me here. I've decorated the walls with photos. One of Rufus and me the day I helped him move into the shelter. Another of Mrs. Higgins and me in front of the diner. One more of my first conference with all those people applauding after I finished speaking. I don't have photos of Keisha. I don't have photos of my old life. That life ended, and although it hurts to admit it, it was the best thing that could have happened because it forced me to rebuild myself. It forced me to discover who I was beyond being a father, beyond being a provider, beyond all the roles others had assigned me. I discovered that I am strong, that I am capable, that I can survive even when everything crumbles around me. A few weeks ago, Mr. Cole offered me a formal job at the organization. We need someone like you, he told me, someone who has lived through this, someone who can lead our support program for victims of family abuse. I told him I would think about it. It's an incredible opportunity, but it also means leaving the diner, leaving the place that gave me refuge when I needed it most. I talked to Mrs. Higgins about it. I expected her to be upset, to tell me I was abandoning her, but instead she smiled. Otis, she said, I gave you work because you needed it. But I always knew you were destined for something bigger. If this opportunity makes you happy, take it. You'll always have a place here if you decide to come back. Her words made me cry because they confirmed something I had started to understand. That good people exist, that kindness is not a weakness, that helping others without expecting anything in return is what makes us human. I accepted the job. I start next month. I'm going to lead a team of social workers and volunteers who help seniors in situations of abuse. I'm going to design programs. I'm going to give training sessions. I'm going to continue giving conferences. But now, as an official part of my job, it's terrifying and exciting at the same time. Yesterday, walking back to my apartment after work, I passed the corner where Rufus used to sit. No one is there anymore, but I stopped anyway. I stood in that spot remembering. I remembered the first time I gave him some coins. I remembered all the times we looked at each other in silence. Two men, invisible to the world, but visible to each other. I remembered the night he grabbed my hand and told me not to go back to my rooming house. That warning saved my life. But more than that, it changed the course of my existence. It led me down a path I never would have chosen, but one I wouldn't trade for anything now, because yes, I lost my daughter. I lost my home. I lost the life I knew. But I gained something much more valuable. I gained my dignity. I gained my voice. I gained the certainty that I am stronger than I ever imagined. And I gained a new family. Not of blood, but of choice. Rufus, Mrs. Higgins, Lisa, Brenda, Mr. Cole, Jasmine, all the people I've met at my conferences. Everyone who helped me when I was at my lowest point. This morning, as I was having coffee in my apartment, I received a message from Rufus. Breakfast together today. I have something to tell you. I replied, yes, immediately, because that's what family does. It shows up. It's there in the good times and the bad. I put on my coat, the one I bought with the money from the land sale, and walked toward the community kitchen where we had agreed to meet. The sun was shining. It was cold, but not unpleasant. The city was waking up around me, full of life, full of possibilities. And as I walked, I thought about everything that had happened, how far I had come, the man I had been, and the man I had become. I am no longer the 9-year-old man who was kicked out of his house. I am no longer just the victim of his daughter's betrayal. I am Otis Washington. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. I am living proof that it is never too late to start over. And if my story can help even one person find the courage to get out of an abusive situation, then every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear will have been worth it. Because in the end, life is not about what happens to us. It is about what we do with what happens to us. And I chose not to remain a victim. I chose to get up. I chose to fight. I chose to turn my pain into purpose. And that, more than anything else, is my victory. I arrived at the kitchen and saw Rufus waiting for me at a table by the window. When he saw me enter, he smiled. That smile I had first seen 2 years ago on a street corner. That smile that had saved my life. I sat across from him and took his wrinkled hand in mine. "Thank you," I said. "Not for the first time. Probably not for the last time." "For what?" he asked, though we both knew the answer. "For seeing me when no one else would. For helping me when you had no reason to. For reminding me that there's still goodness in this world." He squeezed my hand. "You did the same for me. We saved each other." And he was right, because that's what people who find each other in the darkness do. They hold on. They support each other. And together they find the way back to the light. Thank you for being here, and for letting me share my story. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know we're not alone in this. Tell me in the comments what city you're tuning in from. I love seeing where this community reaches. And if you'd like to support my work, a small donation is always appreciated. I share new life stories every single day. Now, be sure to check out the 2 videos popping up on your screen. Until next time.